Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. Welcome to another weekly study. And today we're going to talk about creatine and more specifically, creatine and creatinine. Now, in the Facebook group, I believe it was Ashley had posted kind of a question or an explanation. And actually, it was from the chapter on supplements, chapter 10 in the NASM 7th edition. And Ashley's kind of question, a comment was really pretty good because it's something that I have seen for many years, believe it or not, and we're still seeing today, which is that there is some confusion. Some folks are confusing the supplement creatine with the metabolic marker of wear and tear on muscle tissue known as creatinine. So, and NASM mentions the two of them in the supplementation component. And it's actually important to know the difference, obviously. And that's real world information. Just so you know, from a testing perspective, chapter 10 itself, not the lowest priority chapter, but not a high priority chapter, because from a scope of practice perspective, we got to be careful that we don't speak too much or speak outside of or get out of our lane when it comes to giving people recommendations. Creatine, it's a done deal. We know what it does. Creatine monohydrate in particular. We know what it does. There's 30 years of information and studies, 30, 40 years of this. There's really no issue with creatine as far as its efficacy and what it purports to do, which is to increase muscular hypertrophy, power, strength, speed, blah, blah, blah. Like I say, it's a done deal. I've used creatine over the years. And every time I use it, anybody I know that does resistance training, men, women, young, old, there's differing levels of efficacy, of course, but it works in what it purports to do. Just like a whey protein supplement. Whey protein supplements, they shouldn't say increase strength. No. It's a supplement. So it will increase amino acid concentrations. It will replace protein foods if you use it for that. So creatine as a supplement is going to affect basically creatine phosphate levels in your blood, but let's go in your muscles. So let's go ahead and I'm going to pull this up. So again, chapter 10, creatine usage. In the Facebook group, again, Ashley had asked or made a comment, and it was related to the term creatine, but then this other term that NASM throws in there, which is what you're going to see on a CBC or blood panel, this word creatinine. And again, it's confusing because creatine, right? Creatine itself is a supplement, right? Creatine versus creatinine. And again, once you get this down, it's pretty basic. It's simple, but your clients may not be as discerning if they see their blood work and they look at well, I'm taking creatine. And by the way, I'm telling you this because I've had it happen any number of times where I've got clients were using creatine monohydrate as a supplement, young and older individuals, and they get their blood work done because I tell my clients, you got to get your blood work done. You've got to, right? Just as a regular health and wellness thing you should be doing. And so they would look at their creatinine, or they'd bring it in and go, hey, look at my creatinine levels are high. Right. So the ability to help somebody sort of navigate through that, take you literally 5 seconds to explain it, is going to be beneficial. So remember, creatine is the supplement, right? There you go. This is what we're buying from the store. I don't know. You go into any, GNC or any other health food store, and I don't know, because I haven't been in any of those in a long time, but you probably have 20 to 30 different brand names or different brandings of creatine monohydrate. Like I say, there are other forms, and this is not a study on creatine itself. It's just to show you creatine is the supplement. You use it, you buy it, whatever. You take 2 grams, 5 grams, you load it, you don't load it. It's not relevant, to be honest with you. You got to take, generally, the idea is that you use some sort of high glycemic sugar, generally sugar like sucrose or table sugar, or even just straight glucose if you can get your hands on it, to increase the overall pulsing of insulin while you take the creatine. That high levels of insulin production caused by high levels of sugar intake, right, are going to assist and help with the shuttling and pushing of the creatine into the muscle cells, cell volumization, yada yada. Go read it on Google. There's a million articles on it. You can read it. Point is that creatine is the supplement, right? Creatinine is just a number, and by the way, I'm giving you this little chart here. Creatine is a supplement. Creatinine is just one of many different markers, but this is the one that you will see on what we call it a CBC or blood panel. And this is normally what you're going to get when you go get your blood work done. You've seen this probably, 100 times if you do it. See here, see, there's your creatinine level. So creatine, and then you add an IN and you get this word called creatinine. Again, it's a molecule that is a metabolic waste product. Anytime, I remember when I was much younger, I was training really hard, and I trained like on a Monday or Tuesday, I don't remember. But then a day or two later, I went and got my blood work done. And guess what variable was really, really high? And it was always elevated, was my creatinine levels. My doctor he looked at me and he goes, "You worked out, didn't you?" And I go, "Yeah, I work out every day." He goes, "Yeah." And it wasn't even an issue. Why? Because all my other parameters were fine. My blood urea nitrogen, or my BUN, which is a good indicator if you got renal or kidney issues. That's what a doctor will look at. But your creatinine levels, they vary, right, based on any number of different variables. So that's creatinine. Don't confuse the two, but make sure you can explain the difference if a client does bring it up. Okay, so creatine, great supplement when used properly. It does increase power, strength, blah, blah, blah. Creatinine is just something that is going to show up on a blood panel, generally on a complete blood workup, right? A CBC. And as long as it's within those parameters, you're fine. If it's elevated, that's what a doctor does. A doctor looks and goes, okay, what are possible reasons for elevated creatinine levels? Well, generally, it's going to be an issue with your blood system, your kidneys, or your renal system itself not being able to excrete high, the elevated levels, or you just have a whole lot of creatinine in your blood that your kidneys are working to get rid of. Your kidneys are working fine. You just got a lot of it in your blood because you worked out. Just as a for instance, so muscle catabolism. By the way, not just skeletal muscle, but heart muscle. By the way, it's one of the things that a doctor can use to check to see if there are any heart issues that a person might have. I've seen it used for that. But generally, if you are a fit, resistance training athlete or not, you work out a lot, you'll probably have a elevated creatinine levels, but your doctor decides that. Obviously, as a trainer, we don't do that. So, but again, I just pulled this up so you can see if you get your blood work done, you would check your creatinine levels again, because Ashley had mentioned it and referenced in chapter 10 the NASM part of it. I thought it was a good idea for you to understand the difference between the two. And the reason NASM mentions that is because you will have clients, because I've had them, that are concerned about using creatine supplements because perhaps they did have a higher level of creatinine when they got their blood work done. Unless a doctor says you've got kidney issues, don't worry about it. It's generally not a big deal. Now, of course, if you want your client, it's not a bad idea to have them talk to their physician. High creatinine levels might indicate something else, but a physician would obviously do, well, I would hope, would do further follow-up and further blood work. And that's what they would do. That's where that, by the way, that BUN CR ratio comes in, right? So, but we're not talking about blood work. So how then let's just quickly go through this just so you can now explain basically how creatine actually does work. Okay. First and foremost, if you remember in your NASM book, I'm grabbing the pen here, your NASM book shows you these basic some of these basic figures. And of course, figure 10.8 is going to be your go-to figure. Why? Because it basically explains creatine phosphate and how it works to increase short-term energy production in the ATP PC system. Remember, I've done this on other studies where we've gone a little bit more in depth into the energy, or what's known as bioenergetics. But look, you're a trainer. You want to pass the exam, but come on, this is the cool stuff. This is the really cool stuff when it comes to training that you can talk to people about. And this is one of the things that people find very interesting and actually want to get into training about, because this is the biochemistry. Why, when you take creatine, do you get stronger? Well, remember, your muscles, skeletal muscles, have a innate supply of creatine phosphate, or phosphocreatine, whichever you write, PC, whichever. Don't worry about the terminology, but ATP, which is obviously the energy currency that the body uses. In fact, the animal kingdom uses. So ATP gets broken down. So ATP, adenosine triphosphate, gets broken, or at least that terminal phosphate group gets broken, releases energy. When that terminal phosphate group, one of the three, that third phosphate group gets removed, there is a release of energy, and now you're left with ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. And then this stuff over here is just kind of, that phosphate group is just hanging around. Well, this is where creatine, not creatinine. Forget creatinine now. Remember, that's just a waste product. But creatine is now going to act as a sort of a energetic shock absorber. ATP gets used up, but your muscles contain this innate level of creatine phosphate. Creatine is nice enough to donate its phosphate back to the adenosine diphosphate molecule. Isn't that nice of our creatine? Yay, creatine. So creatine phosphate is a molecule, and of course, and then it donates that phosphate back to the and now you got ATP again. Remember, creatine phosphate itself is not the main producer of energy. It's ATP, right? But ATP, it's kind of like Batman and Robin, right? You got Batman and you got his buddy Robin over here. So ATP does its thing, and then Robin comes along and says, here you go, Batman, here's another phosphate. Now you can keep, and it just boom, 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 just keeps doing that. That will last roughly 12 to 15 seconds, somewhere around there. But this is the point is that when you take additional creatine, your muscles are well adapted to increase the intrinsic levels of creatine phosphate in the muscle cell itself. The more creatine you take in, the more creatine phosphate ultimately will be available for the short-term production of energy. Well, duh, what do you think is going to happen? The more creatine, the more energy I can produce in a given period of time. Voila, you get stronger. And so that's kind of that side of it. Look, you can go deep into the explanation of this. It's really cool, by the way. But what's more interesting, particularly now think about this. This is from an athletic performance perspective. This is why with track and field athletes, when I used to train track and field athletes, particularly sprinters or javelin throwers or discus, individuals interested in very high power output, you get on creatine. You got to use creatine. Why? Because this is going to enhance performance in short-term energy output. It's just the way it is, what it is. It's not like we question this anymore. As long as all the other parameters are in line and all the boxes are checked, once you add creatine into the nutritional daily components of a power, strength, speed athlete, it generally is going to be of help. So that's the performance side. But here, this is the other thing that we need to keep in mind. And this is where the average weightlifter, bodybuilder for sure, is interested in creatine as a supplement because it increases what's known as myofibrillar and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. What's the difference between the two? I think I might have actually used this picture before. The key here is that in a muscle cell, you have two basic components. Boy, this is really simplified. You have the actual myofibrils, as you can see here. So that's the actual proteins, right? The actin, myosin filaments, and all of the solid stuff, right? That's in the muscle cell, right? Myofibrils are the actual structures that run the entire length of a muscle cell, where we have the actual actin myosin collaboration in what are known as sarcomeres, right? So muscle fibers, right? Muscle fibers. That's generally what we understand from the contractile components. So that's the solid stuff. And then there is what's known as the sarcoplasmin. That's the liquid side of a muscle cell. Think of it like a water balloon with like straws in the water balloon. If I put more water in the water balloon, what's it going to do? It's going to increase in diameter, hypertrophy. Yes. But if I don't add any more straws, I still get an increase in the diameter of the water balloon, right? So that's what we're showing here. If you start out with a muscle cell at this diameter, right? This diameter, you have two basic components that can increase the diameter of the actual muscle cell itself. The solid portions are the proteins. That's what we call myofibrillar. I can simply increase the total amount of proteins inside the muscle cell itself. In other words, I can increase myofibrillar, the myofibers themselves, and that's called myofibrillar hypertrophy. But I can also I put more water in the water balloon, right? So in the case of the myofibrils, I can increase their size, as you see here, right? Increase in size, or I can simply add more water into the water balloon. We call that sarcoplasm, and that's known as sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Please understand, they do not occur in isolation. There's a ton of studies out there if you ever want to go and read about it. This stuff happens simultaneously. There's no way you're going to get just myofibrillar growth. You're a power lifter, for instance, and there's a tremendous stress on the contractile components, contractile proteins. No, powerlifters as well are going to get increased sarcoplasmic hypertrophy as well. Bodybuilders who are pushing very heavy towards the sarcoplasmic hypertrophic capacity of a muscle cell is going to get significant myofibrillar hypertrophy. So they both occur simultaneously. The point here is that creatine use, it's a given when it comes to its efficacy in muscular hypertrophy. I thought I'd just give you this little kind of look again at what we're talking about with creatine use and how it actually works. This is, again, one of the reasons why you can get stronger, right? And for sure, creatine usage makes you can actually increase your strength significantly, but you will also, man, the pump you get, if you've never used it and you start taking it, it's one of the things we notice is people feel more pumped. They feel tighter when they exercise, and then the subsequent increase in body weight, generally a couple of pounds, all the way up to, I've seen folks gain 10 pounds, 12 pounds. Now that's through consistent use. You don't need to cycle creatine. It's not necessary. It's not like an anabolic hormone that's affecting receptor site shutdown or anything like that. Again, anabolic steroids, you cycle it because the effect of the hormone derivative is actually affecting the receptor site. You get receptor site shutdown, blah, blah, blah. Creatine doesn't work that way. Creatine gets shuttled in through normal processes from insulin activity on muscle cells. That volumization, cell volumization component is simply the increase of water in and around the muscle cell. That's where that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy comes in. So again, in your conversation with your clients, make sure you understand these differences. Okay, blood work is what it is. You see creatinine levels. Okay, don't worry about that if everything else is normal. Creatine, the supplement, you don't need to cycle creatine. You could technically stay on it, I guess, forever. I don't recommend that, but just keep in mind when you come off of the supplement use of creatine, guess what happens? You go back to normal, which is why the recommendation, what I've always done with, especially with athletes, is they've got to be on that. They've got to be on creatine use for 4 months, 5 months, even upwards of 6 months to get the aggregate myofibrillar development or hypertrophy that comes along with creatine supplement usage. So again, remember the goal is not to get into creatine as a supplement too deep. I just wanted to kind of give you some info, Ashley, in particular, to help clarify any discrepancies that there may have been with what you see in the NASM book, chapter 10 on creatine and creatinine. So I hope that this was of benefit. If you have questions, keep in mind, anytime we do weekly studies, you can leave the messages below, because on YouTube, as you can see, you can, first of all, subscribe to the channel, but you can leave comments and just let us know if you need follow-up information on the particular subject that we've gone over here, or you have sort of a rabbit trail you want to go off of. We're more than happy to help and assist. Remember, Body Design University wants to help you to pass your NASM certification test on the first go around. But if you've already taken it and you've failed, okay, we get that. You're probably in good company. A lot of folks do. We want to make sure that on the second or whatever time you're taking it, we want you to pass it so that you can get that certification and show everybody that you got it. And you would hold it up, take a picture of it, and let everybody see it. Please reach out and let us know if you need any assistance in your NASM studies. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Thanks.